When you see ADAMA, you see unbridled Black excellence. Whether on the African continent, throughout the diaspora, or in your indigenous residence, it represents our unbridled global presence. Whether prologue, present, or prescient, it's a tribute to the days of the troubadours and chevaliers, to the griots heaven sent. It raised protest and said none rest until we put down local and global unrest. To those who refuse to be reticent, to those who refuse to be silenced, it's a love letter to Black love, so warning to white violence. It's years of tears. It's eons of joy. At ADAMA, you will see yourself, your elders, your peers, men and women, ladies and gentlemen, children, girls and boys. It's a place you can explore, digest, and enjoy in a minute or a week, in a year or an hour. And what makes it unique is that it's complete and completely ours. It's a seed that blossomed and bloomed into a beautiful rainflower. It's an acorn buried beneath a radiant rain shower that grew into a tree. That voice you hear in your ear on the breeze says, when you see ADAMA, you see our unbridled elegance, you see our undeniable presence, you see our joy, our pain, you see our struggle, our reign. When you see ADAMA, you see unbridled Black excellence. And my card doesn't talk right.
Yes. Welcome, everyone. First of all, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers in the room. My name is Fahamu Puku, and I want to welcome you to ADAMA. We are the African Diaspora Art Museum of Atlanta, and today we have a very special conversation for our ADAMA Arts Salon as we celebrate the exhibition, A Sheild Against Darkness, highlighting the art and scholarship of Pellom McDaniels III, which is a super treat for me personally. Pellom was one of my advisors and mentors, and one of the really the inspiration behind starting ADAMA in the first place. And so today we have a conversation between Clint Fluker and Navváb McDaniels, Pellom's wife. They'll be in conversation about Pellom's art and legacy, and we encourage you all to enjoy the conversation. Also eat some of these snacks and drink some of this coffee. I'm gonna get out of the way so we can start the conversation, but thank you all for being here.
All right, thank you all so much again for coming. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank Fahamu, and I want to thank the ADAMA team for making this possible. I love these salons, and I love the exhibits that are going on in here, not just because I curated one of them, but I do like them. I also want to say Happy Mother's Day again. I want to say Happy Mother's Day to you, Navváb. I know that my mother is on her way here, so make sure everybody knows I said Happy Mother's Day on camera. My mother-in-law, who's also on her way, and of course my dear wife Naseem, who's in the back, the mother of our two children, Zane and Nilu. Doing good over there, Zane. I see you. Happy Mother's Day to you, Naseem. So again, my name is Clint Fluker, and I'm here today with Navváb McDaniels to celebrate the life, legacy, and art of our dear friend, Dr. Pellom McDaniels III, who passed away too soon in April of 2020. For those who don't know, Pellom McDaniels was a father of two extraordinary human beings, Sophia and Ellington, who are also here with us today. And of course, a husband to Navváb McDaniels. Pellom was a scholar, an author, a poet, professor, and a professional football player. He also was the curator of African American collections at Emory's Rose Library. And on a personal note, as Fahamu said earlier, he was a mentor, friend, colleague, and at one point dissertation advisor for me as well in graduate school. And frankly, I just sort of followed a lot of his scholarly career and just sort of modeled it myself. And I at one point became the curator of African American collections at Emory as well, largely due to his tutelage. And so I just want to make sure that I acknowledge that as well. Such a wonderful, wonderful human being. Today we have this conversation next to this exhibit of Pellom McDaniels' art in a show called A Sheild Against Darkness, the art and scholarship of Dr. Pellom McDaniels III. And as a way to properly celebrate this moment, Navváb and I will have a conversation about the context in which this art was made, their personal relationship, and how it influenced what you see on the wall. So we'll kind of go all over the place. I'll ask a few questions, and then at some point I would like to open it up to y'all so you can ask as well. Sound good? All right, let's do it. So Navváb, thanks again for doing this.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering, could you tell us a little bit about yourself to start? Where you come from and how you made your way here to Atlanta?
I come from the Northwest, part of the United States. It's kind of raised all in that area, lived most of my life in Oregon. And I went to Oregon State University, which Pellom and I both went to that school separately, a couple of years apart. This is the third time I have lived in Atlanta. I keep coming back. And so I came here for graduate school at Emory in 1994 for public health. So a master's degree in public health, community health education. I think it's called something different now because it was a long time ago that I was there. And got married to Pellom, moved away to Kansas City. We came back. And then he went to Emory. He graduated, we moved back to Kansas City again. That's the whole thing. And then we came back this last time, and people asked if he would ever leave or if he would leave and go somewhere else. I was like, he can, but we are staying here. This is the third time I've been here. Clearly, I'm not supposed to leave. I'm supposed to stay here. So that's a little bit about me. My parents are in Oregon. Everyone's on the West Coast. We like to go back there sometimes, occasionally.
Now, you said a few different versions of the story where you and Pellom met.
Mhm.
I'd love if you could share some of that with us here today. How did you meet?
Sure. So Pellom and I both went to Oregon State. I said that that's a big part of his story, that he was there on a football scholarship. But he was 4 years older than me. So we met when I was a senior, actually, and he came back for a Black History Month event that was being hosted by his fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi. And we just met briefly in 1993. And then it's a very, very long story, but it's, yeah, so that's we met briefly, and through mutual friends over time kind of finally got in contact. I think I told you the funny story that he finally got in contact with me after I graduated. I was coming here to go to graduate school at Emory, and by coincidence, at that time he played football for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he was coming here to play the Atlanta Falcons. And so I think it was like Labor Day weekend of 1994, and so we met up at the Hilton by the airport and had dinner, and that's still there, and had dinner, and we went to the football game afterwards. And I found a friend who liked football after I'd been living here like maybe 5 days, 10 days. And she came with me, and she was very excited because Joe Montana played for the Chiefs at that time, all that stuff. They kind of walked past us. So she was very excited about that. And Pellom was cool, it was cool. And we talked for about a week after that, but then he ghosted me before ghosting was a thing. Like, he did not call me for 9 months. It was a long time.
What?
Yes, it was crazy. And all my friends, they were like, well, sorry, Navváb, he is a football player. I don't know what you were thinking. If you, at the memorial service that we did, my friend Imara, who some of you might know, Imara was also from Kansas City, Imara Kennedy. And he was like, I said, I don't know how we're going to tell Navváb this just isn't going to work out. How are we going to break this to her? And so anyway, but he didn't talk to me for a while. And so I kind of thought it was all over. And then I got a letter out of the blue. Well, I had gone on that trip to South Africa, and so that I talked with you about, and it was kind of a pretty life-changing thing for me. So I wrote this long letter to everyone I knew, and I made photocopies, and this is kind of, I was 22 or something, I don't know. And so anyway, I sent him that letter.
You wrote like a letter in the mail.
Yes,
That you sent
we
to him.
mailed it, and I typed it, and I put stamps on it. Yes, and so I sent one to him too. And I think then he's a very cautious person, and so and so it's a long story. But he probably he was cautious about a long distance kind of relationship. And so then he was like, oh, she seems smart, not like these other women that are trying to talk to me and stuff. So let me see where this goes. And that's kind of then he got back in touch with me. So. And then
wow.
yeah
I mean, 9 months. And you
Yeah.
still okay.
I
mean,
said
that's
I was
great.
fine with it. Well, he sent me a very nice card and apologized for his behavior. He said,
Oh,
I
okay.
apologize for my behavior. There is no excuse for it.
Okay.
And yeah, so he was
Okay.
cool. Yeah. And
Okay.
he had other things. He had brought his younger brother to live with him in Kansas City. There were lots of things going on. So yeah.
Can I ask you a question
Sure.
that is a little off centered? So when I met Pellom,
Mhm.
he was the curator of African American collections at the
Mhm.
Rose Library. He had done a lot of work with another guest who's here, Randall Burkett,
Yeah.
who was the curator
Hey,
before
Randall.
him.
Yeah.
And he was always wearing a suit. I've actually had never seen Pellom without a suit on.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, did he play football like that in college, or is that something that developed over time? What did he ever do anything different with his style?
Well, yes, but I will tell you first why he wore a suit all the time, because some of his classmates from Emory, when he got into the PhD program, he was older than everyone, because at that point he was maybe 33, 34, and he'd had a career and a life, several careers actually. And he just believed in dressing for the job that you want. And that's what he learned in college. You dress for the job you want. And so he showed up in a suit. And his classmates that I saw a few years ago, they said, she was like, I was in my juicy sweats and everything. And Pellom came in here in his suit and his briefcase. And, so that's why he did that. I think he felt most comfortable when he was out in a suit. He got a little more casual over time and would, wear tennis shoes with his suit and stuff like that. But when he was home, it was a linen shirt and shorts and Birkenstocks.
So he wasn't
Yes.
just trying to compete with Dr. Rudolph Bird, who wore silk like a suit all the time.
I think that was, I forgot about that. I forgot about that. Yeah. Rudolph Bird probably told him that he needed to
wear a suit.
Yeah, you need to dress a certain way. Yeah.
Well,
true.
I'm thinking about his time in college, and you were saying
Mhm.
earlier that yes, he played football,
Mhm.
and yes, of course, he ended up majoring in political science. You said?
Political science and communications.
But was that always his intention? What was his desire when he went to college?
When he accepted his football scholarship to Oregon State, he was in San Jose, and he grew up in the Bay in California, and was raised by his grandparents. And he took that scholarship because he felt like he could finish his degree at Oregon State. He was always very practical, and he thought that he would get distracted at the other places that had offered him a scholarship. And so he took that scholarship to Oregon State, and he said, I want to be a fine arts major, because he was already, he already was a creative. He already was, I think painting and doing things kind of on his own. And, the coaches were like, sure, yeah, whatever. And they, this is 1986. And so he was very excited, went there, had his classes ready. And then he went to go buy his art supplies. And they said, but your scholarship doesn't cover art supplies. You have to pay for those yourself. And so, and they're just, he didn't see a way to be able to do that, because, the art supplies are such an expensive part of the process. And so he was like, okay, all right. And so, and he was also, life was not easy for him, even up to the point he was 18. He'd had a difficult life already. So he was like, I'm just going to switch it up, and I'm going to do this other thing. So he always was a creative. He always wanted to be a professional artist, and that's what he wanted to be, but he just couldn't quite get there in the way that he saw it the way that he had intended the first time.
That's incredible. So the art that we see on the wall in this exhibit is from about 2004 to about 2017.
Yes.
I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But he had made art this entire time.
Mm-hmm.
How did he teach himself to do this?
The same way you teach yourself to do anything. He just watched other people. He tried. That was the really most amazing thing about him, was that he was like, yeah, let's just try it. So he wanted to learn how to do something. He would get a book. He didn't want to take a class, because he would always kind of like, I'm like, I want to do calligraphy. I'm going to take a class. He was like, why? Just get a book and get a calligraphy pen. Just figure it out. He didn't like, classes were not, so he just, he read a lot. He watched what people did. He would watch videos, and he would just learn how to do it. And he'd go in our garage, or I told you, he just did it a garage, dining room table, middle of a living room. And that's where he created all that art. Mhm.
I just have to describe this for people. So like this is just a snippet of the artwork that Fahamu and I came across when we went to Navváb's home. The whole home is just filled with art top to bottom, and it is just floors of art that's stacked on top of art. And most of it's Pellom's work.
Mhm.
And it was just something that we couldn't quite grasp because we'd known him during our graduate school careers, and we knew he did some art. He had the Hammond's House show. We didn't realize that he had probably what looked like 30 years plus of art that was just on the wall and other art that we couldn't see. But this is kind of like part of the course for Pellom. When you know we know him as a scholar, so he published books of scholarship. We knew him as a curator. He did different shows, and so of course we knew him as a football player. But then he had these other projects, and they weren't just like side hobbies. It was like his poetry. He has like books of poetry that are actually out there for you to see.
Mhm.
So it's just a renaissance man of a certain caliber that it's really a special thing.
Mhm.
In that light, I'm wondering what inspired you to do this and support this exhibit today, so that we have this.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, it didn't inspire me. You guys just asked, and and
Shameless plug.
yeah, right. They just asked, and as Fahamu said, he and Pellom talked about this museum. I remember, before he passed away, he was like, "Hey, Fahamu's starting a museum." I was like, "Really? Okay." And so, but he was part of it. He was excited about it, and I knew that this would have been important to him. I talked to our kids, and I was just like, Daddy would have been all over this. So we have to do this. If it's however difficult it might be for us, whatever. So when y'all came to get the paintings, I took pictures of when everything was gone, and to the kids, and I sent a text and said, "We've been robbed," because our walls are very bare right now. So, but yes. But that's the only reason why. Yeah, he would have loved this and would love sitting here talking about his art. We would have read you some poems. He would have been all over it. Yep.
Well, you're both great arts advocates, and I was wondering if you could speak about your personal relationship to the arts and what you created together. You had a nonprofit and a writing club.
Yes, in Kansas City, when Pellom played for the Kansas City Chiefs, he lived there 7 years. And in Kansas City, it's a very different community for support of athletics. Like when you move to Kansas City, if you were, a Detroit fan, you are not in about a few weeks. You become a Kansas City Chiefs fan. That's just how it is. And so everyone is a fan of the Chiefs. Everyone loves them. And I will give them a shout out because they support their players so much. And so because of that, the team encourages players to create a foundation through which they can get involved with the community and kind of see people on a more personal level. So Pellom created something prior to our marriage called Arts for Smarts. And again, it was, he was denied this arts education that he really, really wanted. And so he wanted to make sure that other kids had the opportunity to have their creative abilities recognized and nurtured for what they were. And that's what we did. We, and before we had kids, we just kind of, all these things that we did in the community, we kind of hung out together. So people got used to seeing us together at these events. So we had programs for all ages. And basically it was this Pellom going to classrooms or going to community centers and doing art with the kids. And they thought it was fantastic. Their parents loved it. They loved it. And Pellom, of course, he loved it too. So we had a writing club. That one was my idea because I grew up having writing clubs, and I, believe it or not, I was the writer in the family before he kind of took it over. But we had a writing club, and that was at the Kansas City Public Libraries. We had it at 3 branches, and we would go to each branch once a month and meet with the kids and hang out with them and write poetry and read books. And then another part of it was mentoring. And my first job at a graduate school was in a high school in Independence, Missouri. And they were looking for something for their young Black males. And so Pellom and I would just talk about this. When I would come home from work, I'd be like, yeah, they're looking for something for the young Black students, the male students. And he's like, I could do that. I could be a mentor. And so he, together with John Rounds, who was a counselor at the high school at that time, they created this program, and he would go on his days off once a month, and meet with these young men and take them to different African-American men around the city that he knew, so they could see different careers. And Pellom had friends who were doing all kinds of things. Of course, there was our agent/lawyer, who was, fun to go visit, and he talked about sports law and things like that. But there was also his really good friend who was a reproductive scientist. How often do you find a Black man who's a reproductive scientist living in Kansas City? So it was just a really, Vincent Williams, hey. So he did that with them. He just loved to be a part of the community. And one of the really important things that he wanted kids to get from the arts is the ability to think creatively. Because he said, no matter what career you go into, creative decision-making ability will be invaluable to you. You have to be able to pivot if something doesn't go your way. You have to be able to change it so that you can still be able to do what you want and have an impact. And that was really just kind of the way he lived his life. And he'd been seeing it so valuable to himself. So that was it. He's like, they may not be painters or photographers or sculptors, in the traditional sense, but they will be able to think creatively when faced with a problem or an obstacle.
Now, the work that both of you did, particularly with K through 12 students, is very impressive, and it's continued. I remember when he was working on the Still Raising Hell exhibit at Emory University in 2016, 17, I believe. And it was important for him to not only do an exhibit that would be at the college and showcase this history of the Emory archives, but also make sure that there was another leg that would go to K through 12 schools.
Yeah.
And so he's made it such that Emory started doing these traveling exhibits to, middle school and high schools across the city. And so that was just an amazing kind of addition. And to know that it started with this nonprofit and these kinds of engagements is really something. I was hoping you could talk a little bit too about he had these interests, and you can kind of see it like throughout the artwork. You see his interest in sports, you see his interest in Black men who were in the military. You see a lot of different interests within the artwork itself. Who were some of his influences, whether they were artists themselves who influenced him, or scholars?
Well, you asked me the question about artists, so I came up with the artists.
Yeah, that's fine.
Night. I'm trying to think about the other. Well, the artists, you can see he started out early on. The first art he did after we got married is more like painting and was jazz themed, which was in Kansas City. The history is about baseball, Negro Leagues baseball, jazz, things like that. So he was always kind of creating based on his environment and the historical things that he found around him. But then he became really interested in doing collage. And so Romare Bearden was an influence, Benny Andrews an influence, and Radcliffe Bailey, he was pleased to call his friend. I remember when Radcliffe invited him to play golf, and he was just he didn't know what to do. He was so excited, and he just had to calm himself down because he was so excited. But anyway, I would say those were the kids, and I talked about that. Those were, I'd say, his artistic influences, and of course, the scholarly influences, Cornel West, Henry Louis Gates. Those were he used some of Cornel West's work in his essay for getting into graduate school. That we're not, I can't remember something about, we're not, something about the circumstances in which we're born, but we can change them as we get older. But Black masculinity was always a theme. So we discussed that he was always interested in why did I pursue athletics so heavily? And like, why didn't I look at something else? I don't understand. Why did I want to be a professional athlete? And so he was interested in why Black men pursue sports so disproportionately. And that's what he entered Emory and did his PhD work on. And so because, you know, you see a 6'5" white guy who's an orthodontist, and he's like, why didn't someone make him a basketball player? Like, there are reasons for this. And so that kind of was a meandering route into Black masculinity as a whole. So there was sports, and then he became interested in particularly Black men in World War I. There was, oh gosh, I wish I could remember his name right now. I might. There is a man from Kansas City, and they named one of the lodges after him. And he was a World War I soldier, and he was stationed with other soldiers at night, and they were attacked basically. And this guy had a knife, and he just killed and scared away everybody else. And he was just like this little Black man from Kansas City, Missouri. And so, you know, then those kind of stories, you know, he read about, and he's like, there's more here. And I want people to know this history. And I want people I don't want them just to know about, you know, a lot of people know about the Tuskegee Airmen, but nobody knows about the men in World War I who were out there doing the work that the white soldiers didn't want, you know, they didn't want them to do. And so they let the Blacks, so they did all the terrible work. And but he wanted that to come to the fore and have everyone understand, you know, that they were doing this because they also were patriots, but then also to discuss the treatment they received when they came back home. Is that?
Oh, that's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. So this isn't Pellom's first show.
No.
And as I said before, Fahamu and I went to the house and we were kind of shocked because we had known him for so long, and we knew that he did art. But I'll be honest with you, for the first like 3 or 4 years of knowing him, I had no clue he was an artist. Until one day he came to me while we were working on the Still Raising Hell exhibition. He opened up the sketchbook and he's like, "We're gonna do this," and he had drawn out the entire exhibit, from top to bottom, and the work just in the sketchbook alone. I was like, "So you just do this on the side? Like, you know, you've been hiding this other career I don't know about." He was like, yes. And so I would love it if you could talk a little bit about some of the work that he had done in the arts in terms of showing his artwork prior to the Hammond's House show.
Yeah, his first show was 97, maybe 1998, 97 or 98 in Kansas City. There was a small gallery there owned by a Black family, and they invited him to come show his work. And that was sort of the jazz themed work that he had. I don't think any of it's in here, but yeah, he was so excited. And we stood there and we talked to people. And I remember there was one piece that I really didn't like. You know, I was like, that's very weird. I don't, you know, it wasn't my favorite, right? And so, but this couple came in and they stood there for a few minutes and looked around and they were like, yeah, we want to buy this one. And I was like, oh. And so I said, you know, and so I was like, okay. And so I went over to Pellom. I said, this couple is interested in buying this piece. And he was just like, so excited. And he turned it over and wrote a note. You know, he was so excited. So that was, wonderful. And Ron and Dorothy Cheney, I think, were their names. And they supported Pellom through all of that and, you know, kept his artwork there and sold his posters. So that was a good relationship. When we were back in Kansas City after he finished at Emory, there was a series of shows that he did at a gallery there. They weren't the one-person shows. It was in a collection of artists. I showed you that large piece that's in our house that was a sculptural piece. And so he would create for those exhibitions. He did the Hammond's House exhibition. So yeah, he only had those two that were sort of one-person shows, and then he was a part. And he also would do pieces for other. I was just remembering we were here in Atlanta because our friend Imara Kennedy, again, who's so well connected, he always was asking Pellom, he's like, hey, do you have any artwork that we could, you know, put in this auction for art papers? I don't know if that's still around. So yeah, those are the kinds of things that he did.
Now, I'm aware that on today, which is Mother's Day, we are talking about the work of this great man. And so I would like to kind of reframe this a little bit and really think about how you were able to manage not just this incredible personality that was Pellom, because he was all over the place, but also do this while having your own career, and then also, you know, raising this beautiful family. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. to be honest, when you are partnered with someone who is such a big personality and you have children, something has to give. So I was the one that was with the kids most of the time, and that's just kind of how we did it, and it worked. So we were able to support him in all the different kinds of things that he wanted to do. One thing that I share often with people who, they ask me about getting into a relationship with someone who's a creative type or getting into a relationship with someone who has a big personality. And one thing that I did early on with Pellom, we've been married a couple of years, and I noticed that he was not sleeping very much and that he was involved in lots of things. And I was like, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we just focus on 3 things? Like, you figure out the 3 things that you really want to do, and let's focus on that, because I really think that you need to sleep, and I think that you need to not be so scattered. And so I was like, and I was really thinking I was doing a good thing. And he was a kind man and a good husband, and he was like, okay, I think that's a good idea. So we tried. We made a list of the 3 things that were most important. We did all those things. But one thing that I noticed about him was that he became very sad, and he was just not happy. He was an artist and he needed to get these things out. And in the end, I was just like, I'm sorry. I tried to make you somebody that you weren't. And, I know that this is what you need to do, and I can support you in this. And so we had a deal that you can do all these things, but there has to be money in the bank. We cannot spend all our money on these extra things that you want to do. So, and he agreed. Yeah, it was very clear, so he would do, especially when he was playing football, there were lots of opportunities to make additional income through appearances or radio shows, television shows, which he had all of those things. And he would use that money to kind of pursue these creative interests. And, and his interests went from, he invented a dental product and patented it and sold it to dentists. I was at a dental show, I'm not kidding, selling a dental product at it's not a joke, because he was at training camp. And so I was at the dental show selling this dental product. And eventually he sold that dental product to Procter & Gamble, which also was his first career, which is also another interesting story about Pellom. So
please share.
I will. Pellom, I'll try to condense this. This is such a wonderful story, and so I don't want it to be lost and only in our family. Pellom was supposed to be drafted out of college into the NFL. And, draft day was a little bit different than it is now, but those days came and went, and he was not drafted. And he was very sad and depressed. But prior to that, he's very cautious. And so he had interviewed with Procter & Gamble when they were at Oregon State doing interviews. And he just kind of did it on a lark, like it was a joke. And but then he found he needed a job. And so they had offered him a job, and so he took it. And he ended up selling toothpaste, deodorant, and toilet paper as a regional manager in Oregon. He's like, but my end caps, which are those shelves at the end of the aisle at the grocery store, he goes, they look great. He's like, I did that the best I could. And he said, it was really disappointing that I didn't get drafted. He's like, but I learned so much from being a salesman, that no just means new option. I just will figure out another way to get you to do this. And this is the part of the story that is that I don't want to be lost. So it's such a wonderful story. So he was out having drinks or something with his manager, and some football came on a television screen, and he saw some guy up there, I don't remember his name, and he's just like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so. I played football against him in college. And then his manager was like, huh. He goes, do you ever think about that anymore? He goes, yeah, I think about it sometimes. He goes, don't you think if you were good enough, you'd still be playing? And Pellom was like, huh. And he goes, and he went home and he was just like, you know what, I'll show you. And so he had a company car. He found out, he worked out at Gold's Gym in Beaverton, Oregon, maybe Forest Grove, but anyway, in Oregon. And he saw a flyer for a new league of football called the World League of Football. I think it became NFL Europe. I'm not sure what it is now. But anyway, they were doing tryouts down in California. He drove his company car down to California, and went to these tryouts. He didn't have any cleats. And so he went to Walmart or Kmart or whatever they had, and he looked in the bin for some shoes. He found some red baseball shoes that would be good enough to be cleats, because this is all on the spur of the moment. And when he got there for the tryout, they wouldn't let him, because he had to be invited. He was uninvited. He just showed up. And they wouldn't let him do any of the drills. And so he said, I'm just sitting there and I'm fuming that I cannot do this. I've driven the company car. I've lost my job. I've, probably made my manager, done all these things. He's like, I have to do it. So he just sat there until the end. He said, and they finally let him do one drill. And it's the one where the coach, I don't know the name of the drill, but the coach stands on the uprights, and you're supposed to hit it and push him back, because Pellom was a defensive lineman. And he said he got 3 tries. He's like, and he was so angry at that point that he knocked the coach off every single time. And because of that, he got his place with the Birmingham Fire. He played for them for 2 years, traveled around the world playing football. And then after that was picked up by other football teams. So anyway, it's just such a great story. And I used to love when he would tell it. And that's why I know it so well, because it's just so inspirational.
Well, I don't know if you're aware that after college, Fahamu and we didn't make the league either. That's why we, got
I understand.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I only have a couple questions left, and then we'll open it up to everyone else. I was hopeful that you could speak about how he supported you in your career.
Sure.
And the things that you're interested in.
Yeah. Well, as I said, we were married for about 5 years before we had kids, and we kind of just did everything together. And it was fun talking with you the other day, because I remembered something I had forgotten, which was my first job again at that high school. And we had a community meeting. And so basically we would just do everything together. So people got used to seeing Pellom and Navváb together. And it was, when I wasn't there, they'd be like, where's Navváb? Where's Pellom? Are they, if we were separate. But we had to do a community meeting, and he was like, what are you doing tonight? I'm like, I'm gonna do this thing at the school. And I said, oh, it'd be fun if you came. You could sit in the back or hand out my flyers or something. People would love that. So, and again, as I said, in Kansas City, maybe in Atlanta, you could have someone there that was a professional athlete and people might not know who they are. But in Kansas City, it's not like that. So they know exactly who you are. When I was getting married, before we got married, I was talking to some people in Kansas City, and I was like, yes, I'm moving there. And, I just thought I'd call and say hello. And getting to know some new people, they said, oh, who are you marrying? I said, oh, his name is Pellom McDaniels. And then we hung up. And by the time, in 5 minutes, everybody said, oh my God, there's this woman moving here and she's marrying one of the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's kind of how it is. So anyway, he sat in the back. And when I had to hand out my flyers, I said, and now, my husband Pellom is going to hand out the flyers to you. And everybody went like this. And they were and he was just laughing and stuff. So he would, he just did stuff like that. It was great. We spent time together doing things like that. And then even when we had kids, I did some programming here in Atlanta for young women, and Pellom would always come, and he'd have Ellington, who was 1.5, and they would just be hanging out all day while our conference was going on. So that's kind of, and he was always looking for new opportunities for me too, things I did not want to do. Navváb, do you want to write a book? There's a publisher who wants to write it. I know that you can write a book. You spend all your time all day reading those books. Why can't you write one? I was like, I do not want to write a book. And so, things, yeah. So, and he did that for many people. He always found opportunities for people.
That's definitely true.
Mm-hmm.
Pellom is not the only artist in the family.
No.
And I would love for you to speak about Sophia's work and Pellom's influence on her work.
Yes, Sophia is our daughter. She is just finished her second year at MICA, which is Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. She's a painter, a very talented painter. When Sophia was a baby, she would sit up really straight, and she took these I don't even know, they were plastics, they weren't Tinker Toys, but you know, Tinker Toys, and you can kind of, there's a round thing and you put like these little things in these holes and you put them together. Sophia would do that when she was like 8 months old, and she would sit there and her hands were very steady and she would put all these things together and she would do this, and Pellom was like, I think she's going to be an artist. And so he would give her things like to draw and to do all these things. And so he just kind of really groomed her to be an artist, I think. So he spent a lot of time doing that. When she was in elementary school, and she always said she was an artist from that point. But when we moved here to Atlanta, there was another girl in her class in like 3rd grade who was also a very good artist. So then she was like, because she was used to being the best artist in the room. So she took a little break for a couple of years because she got a little bit sad about it. And Pellom was very upset. He was like, why is she not making art? I don't know what's happening. And so, but luckily in middle school, she had an art teacher who encouraged her to kind of, you know, that she could do, you know, it's okay if there's more than one good artist in the room. Yeah, but she's a painter, and she's also a film minor. She doesn't want me to say anymore that she's a filmmaker, even though she's made little films. But that's what she does.
That's excellent.
Mm.
Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Sure.
And I could really talk to Navváb all day about this, but I want to make sure that I've left some room for y'all to ask questions as well. So if you have any questions, please.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
I think you did an amazing job telling Pellom's story, and I would love to know where we are with that book, because I would love to read a book if you wrote it, a movie. I think that you do an amazing, beautiful job telling the story. Just writing about anything, writing about him. Like, where are we with that? Like,
oh, yeah. That's sweet. Yeah. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I haven't started that yet, but maybe I will. Maybe I will.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi.
I have a question about Pellom's NFL sort of, or getting to football, the path that he took.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that him being drafted, or not being drafted, but going the path that he took to where he had to play like internationally, had an effect on his artwork compared to if he was like drafted domestically? Do you think it had any type of effect?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I do. I'm not sure he would have pursued it as heavily. Do you know what I'm saying? Because he would have achieved that. Being drafted is a whole nother thing. You know, he had to work really, really hard to get back into the league, and he had to work really, really hard to stay there. So I think one thing about the art that he created throughout his time as an athlete and then as an academic, he always was creating art that had something to do with what he was experiencing or learning about at that time. So a lot of it was meditative, I think, for him. And so that was how he got his stress and anxiety and things out. And so I think, you know, he might have been more comfortable if he had been drafted. You know, I think out of this sort of shakiness of the foundation, he wanted to create a foundation for his life, and constantly it was being taken away from him, you know, and he always had to work so hard, incredibly hard. So yeah, I definitely think that had a big impact on him, and I think he could empathize a lot with people. So yeah, no, I definitely do.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you both so much for this conversation. Not to bring down the spirit at all, but Pellom seemed to have such a great, large, energetic personality and filled up a lot of space. How have you dealt with him not being in your space since he's left?
Oh, I think the pandemic helped a lot because I didn't have to go anywhere. So yeah. He's not someone that's easily replaceable. But things like this are nice, and the opportunity to talk about him is always fun. So, yeah. Sure.
Hi, how are
Hey,
you?
Ari, good.
It's really, really good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And I guess I wanted to ask, like, walking into your house just so many times when I was younger, I think
Mhm.
I saw so much of that beautiful artwork. And how did Pellom feel about presenting about that artwork? Was he comfortable, kind of like when someone came into the house, you know, talking about it? And like, how would he go about that? Because I remember him talking a lot about it when I was there for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, he loved to talk about his artwork. So I think most people didn't realize that most of the artwork in our house was his. And so they were curious about it and they'd say, "Where did you get this?" I'm like, "Oh, Pellom made that." And people would be just like shocked. So, and you know, you came over so many times. He always had a lecture at the ready. And so I was like, "Okay, don't talk to him right now because he will have you cornered for an hour." So yeah, he was very happy to talk about it. And I will say one thing about you, Ari, that Ari we've known since he was an infant, and he was one. Pellom did not like to watch sports with very many people because people talked too much. They had too many opinions. He liked to watch it with the sound off, you know, all of that stuff. And he and Ari would sit and watch football together on the couch, and they'd look at each other when something happened like this. And so, yeah, so he was Pellom's good friend. But yeah, no, he's very happy to talk about his art, about his scholarship, about anything that he felt was really important. Yeah.
I just echo everyone. Thank you guys so much for this conversation. I had a question. I'm an athlete and a coach now,
Okay.
and work in the K through 12 space. So I just find it very inspiring to hear about, an athlete that's multifaceted and has, other talents and passions. Oftentimes, I think you spoke to this, when you make it to the professional level, you're very specialized in what you do.
Yeah.
And you're a
Yeah.
football player and that's it.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, along his journey, particularly his professional athletic career, did you find other, or did he have other athletes who were also artists, or, and what were those relationships like?
Yeah, he actually, when he was playing for the Falcons, he curated a show for the National Black Arts Festival called Athletes in the Arts. And he went and found, there was another guy who played for the Falcons at that point who was a painter. And he was like, yeah, come put your paintings in these shows. And then he, found other people and then highlighted the musicians. I can't remember. There was a basketball player who was a guitarist, and so yeah, he created those relationships with people and really sought out those because he felt like it was not emphasized, that they are multifaceted people. There are lots of things going on, and they interact with their community in different ways, and it's important to make a full human portrait of these men. They're not just athletes. So I was just thinking too, back when he started playing, the salaries were not the way they are now too. So you had to do extra things to keep your lifestyle going. So yeah, so that's, if that answers the question, yeah.
One more question.
Sure.
You talked about the foundation that was started in Kansas City and how the team encouraged players to do that.
Yes.
And it seems as if the volunteerism and the pouring back into community is something that he brought with him to Atlanta. Is that something, the volunteerism, was it innately him anyway? Or do you think Kansas poured that into him? Do you think that legacy would have followed him had he not started the foundation in Kansas City, essentially?
Yes, it was part of who he was. He wanted to be very involved in the community. He wanted to be a mentor for kids. And he always said, his fraternity Kappa Alpha Psi, they volunteered so much that he, Pellom, and I always tell our kids this, I'm like, Daddy was a race man. That was, he was just out in the community trying to lift people up and train people to come after him, which is, I'm really glad to say, the two of you, that he took that to heart, that you have to train younger people to come after you, and you have to be willing to step aside to let them kind of take the reins at some point. So no, that was completely who he was. He was not happy unless he was out amongst the people engaging. Yeah, that was just totally who he was.
We're gonna take two more questions, but I do have one
Sure.
for me. One of my most fond memories of Pellom was taking classes with him at Emory. We never sat in a room and had a dialogue. Like my class meetings with him, he'd give me a reading, and then for our meeting, we'd spend an hour and 15 minutes just walking the quad
Yeah.
and discussing whatever the topic was. But just thinking about, you know, Pellom's energy, like I don't know if I ever actually saw him sitting down anywhere. Like he was always on the go,
Yeah.
on the move. He's
Yeah.
working on books, he's researching, he's curating, he's doing all these things. And then I look at this art that he made, and this is not pedestrian art by any stretch of the imagination, right? It's really complex, lots of materials, lots of, you could see his thinking, you could see his process. When did he have time to do this?
Oh, so, you know, I think when I was, do you remember when I said, I was like, let's pick 3 things to do. You know, you're not sleeping very much. You're not doing these things. I made the mistake of thinking that he needed and wanted to sleep. He did not. He did not want to sleep. He would wake up at night and have these ideas. Probably you are similar. I mean, you wake up, you have an idea, and he just goes and does it. And yeah, he did it in off hours, because when he would be on campus in his office, people were always knocking on the door. So he didn't have time to work at work. So he had to do his work at home, and he did his art. And as I said, the work that he did was difficult, because it's unearthing this history, and then you learn about how tragic it was. It was, you know, people were talented, they were living their lives, they were creating communities for themselves, and it was just taken away. And it was tragic, and he would hold that inside, just this knowledge of these just awful things that would happen, and he would put it out into his art. And that, I think he did it at night when he couldn't sleep. Yeah, and he didn't sleep much.
I really love the story you said, that at one point you tried to make him do only 3 things.
I did. Yeah.
And somehow I see like clipping his wing.
Yes, exactly.
Or
Exactly.
bracing them.
Yes.
And then you realize he was not happy.
Right.
And that takes lots of courage from a partner to really see that and say, okay,
Yeah.
I set you
thanks.
free.
Yeah.
So back on that scenario that you explained, how much of his success was also because of this flexibility that you had with him and allowing him to soar without?
Oh, well, I hope it was a part of it, but certainly, you know, I think that's what a partnership should be, you know, and I was lucky enough to be part of a really good one. That you see the person you're married to, see the person you're partnered with, and you just let them be who they are. There's an interesting story that I heard a couple of years ago where an anthropologist, a long time ago, I think it was Margaret Mead, she said that people would be married 3 times in their life. And basically back then, you know, life expectancy was different. And so that made sense at that point. But then her daughter or granddaughter was talking about it on NPR. And she said, I think that now what that means is that if we stay married to the same person for a long time, that they will be 3 different versions of themselves. And so what I like to think, I like to think that our marriage was being able to see the person as they're growing and changing, and accepting them as they grew and changed, and continuing on with the partnership and seeing how we needed to adjust to allow them to be the person that they want to be. So yeah, I don't know how much of it, I mean, I like to say that, okay, well, certainly having a good partnership allows you to kind of grow and be who you are. And I was very happy to support him. And it was our pleasure to see him in these arenas, just kind of being who he was. It was delightful.
a little Pellom story. Since I'm last, I go ahead and do this. A gentleman gave some money to Emory, to the marble collection, to purchase some pictures of mine for the collection. And Randall and Pellom and a photographer and a few other people came to my studio. And so they were looking at pictures. I had pulled some stuff out that I wanted to see in the collection. And so when Pellom came around behind me, there was one particular picture when nobody else was looking. Pellom took that picture and hid it behind the desk over there. And I said, well, hell, that's one he don't want, and I like it, you know. But anyway, after they had went and picked the amount of pictures that they were going to have for the money that they were going to get, they went on and they were all out in the hallway, and Pellom came back in, and he picked the picture up and he came in. He said, Jim, how much is this one? And I said, what do you mean, how much? You know, I said, well, y'all, I'll donate one. He said, no, I want to, okay. He said, well, I'll be back. He called me up later and he said, look, I want to buy that picture. I gave it to him, you know. I said, Pellom, if you want it that bad, I'm going to give it to you. It was the one that I took of my nephew and my son. It was a silhouette, all right? A black and white silhouette of kids pointing out across the water. Yes. So that's a Pellom story. He wasn't going to let that go into the collection. So I can say it now, Randall.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I know exactly where that picture is in our house. And he always said, he gave this to me as a gift. He was so excited. Yeah, he just loved, especially the things that were gifts from other artists. He was just like, oh, I just love this. So yeah, thank you so much.
Well, I just want to say one more time, thank you so much for speaking with us today, for being in this conversation. You've really just sort of enlightened our day here on Mother's Day. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank y'all.
I typically try not to badger my audience, but I'm gonna do this today and ask y'all to indulge me and please stand and give Navváb a hand. Yeah. Thank you for sharing Pellom with us. So I'm just gonna share one last very brief Pellom story. Shortly after Pellom passed away, unfortunately, ADAMA received its first major gift from Navváb in Pellom's name, which became the seed for this institution that you see before you today. So we're really grateful to be able to celebrate Pellom in this way, to honor his legacy, and to continue doing the great work that he introduced me to, and Clint too as well. And so we encourage you all to please explore, experience the exhibition that we have here, and continue to support ADAMA. There's some flyers around. We're happy to receive the kind that jingles, but we'd rather have the kind that folds. You know how it goes. But support, your support means that we can continue doing programming like this and continue to celebrate the African diaspora in really powerful and beautiful ways. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Navváb. Thank you, Sophia and Ellington. And thank you to everyone for coming out today. The exhibition will be open. We'll get some music going and we'll have a good time. Thank you.